strategic justification for this to destroy Iran's conventional capabilities. To what extent did you hear a "why now" argument from Secretary Hegseth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of what we're all wrestling with today, the why now. And we've seen this president say yesterday in his video message late last night that we have many objectives, and yet today, I think we heard the military objectives, and I do think General Kane did do a pretty incredible job just laying out not only the operation and the multifaceted locations that were hit in Iran, but sort of the capabilities that they want to level and destroy. But that still doesn't get to the end objective. And I think what you saw Secretary Hegseth do is sort of lay it out in political terms and trying to win the messaging fight here. And that's sort of what, he would do as the cabinet member. And I think to Nick Payne-Walsh's reporting, he also said that, the president could go out tomorrow and declare victory, or this could go on for 4 to 6 weeks and he could declare victory then. I think that's what you saw Hegseth trying to lay out. I still didn't walk away from the press briefing with a clear understanding of what the end goal is. And I think you heard that from reporters in the room who have not been able to ask the secretary or members of his press staff for many, many months these questions. And so one thing that really stood out to me that the secretary said is that we're not going to tell the American people, we're not going to broadcast to our adversaries, we're not going to give you any details on how long we're going to stay. I don't think the American people are asking for a play-by-play of what you have planning, but what we are asking for is how the department that demands a $1 trillion budget is going to spend our taxpayer dollars. And for how long? Because if you don't want to have endless wars, then explain to us when the end goal is. When have you met your objective? I heard the military objective from General Kane. I did not hear the overall objective from this administration of when we're going to see an end to this.
All right, Sabrina, stand by. I also now want to bring in the former U.S. ambassador to Israel during the Obama administration, Ambassador Daniel Shapiro. Thanks for jumping on. I appreciate it. You listened to this as well. Just to reiterate what Pete Hegseth laid out, and he said over and over again, was what he says was a very clear objective here, and why now? Why he said the United States and Israel needed to conduct these joint operations is Iran's stubborn and self-evident nuclear pursuits, their targeting of global shipping lanes, their swelling arsenal of ballistic missiles and killer drones were no longer tolerable risks. Iran was building powerful missiles and drones to create a conventional shield for their nuclear blackmail ambitions. Does that explain the why here, why now to you, a justification?
Thanks for having me. It doesn't really, because all of those conditions obtained on the years leading up to this war. It's also the case that the president was in nuclear negotiations with Iran only a week or two ago and said he was prepared to take a deal, a tough deal, Iran was unlikely to take, of abandoning enrichment, nuclear enrichment, and shipping out their enriched material. But he was prepared to leave in place the ballistic missile capability if he had gotten that deal. Several weeks earlier, he had said that help was on the way to the protesters. So there's a lot of fuzziness about the why now. And unfortunately, this was the clearest presentation so far the administration has made to the American people about the reasons and the goals, but it wasn't that clear. And it's in tension with the president himself in almost every conversation he has with a different reporter, saying something slightly different. It is regime change. No, it's only for nuclear. No, it's also for missiles. No, it's also to defend the people. It could end tomorrow and he could declare victory, or it could go for several more weeks. So if the president can stay disciplined about a message to the American people, that would be helpful. This was clarifying, but not sufficiently to know for sure the goals and certainly the why now.
Ambassador, thanks so much for jumping on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to all of our guests right there analyzing what we just heard from the Defense Secretary and Chair of the Joint Chiefs. Brand new hour of CNN News Central starts right now.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And you are looking at live pictures of the skyline of Beirut in Lebanon. Israel increasing its targeting of Hezbollah inside that country. Hello and welcome to CNN's breaking news coverage of a Middle East conflict that began 3 days ago and is only escalating. I'm Becky Anderson. We've just heard from the Pentagon in Washington, where it is 9 a.m. It is 6 p.m. here in Abu Dhabi at CNN's Middle East programming headquarters. Top U.S. defense officials giving their first on-camera update since the U.S. launched its war against Iran over the weekend. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has just said that the U.S. had no choice but to take action. Have a listen.
Iran was building powerful missiles and drones to create a conventional shield for their nuclear blackmail ambitions. Let me say that again. A conventional shield for their nuclear blackmail ambitions. Our bases, our people, our allies, all in their crosshairs. Iran had a conventional gun to our head as they tried to lie their way to a nuclear bomb.
Well, the U.S. military says a fourth service member has died after suffering injuries during Iran's first round of retaliatory attacks. U.S. Central Command also investigating what it is calling an apparently friendly fire incident. The U.S. says 3 of its fighter jets were accidentally shot down by Kuwaiti air defences. And this is image that we've had into CNN about that. Officials adding that all 6 crew members did manage to eject. We are told they are in a stable condition. And there is more ominous smoke on the skyline in this region of the Gulf as the conflict rapidly escalates. This video, geolocated by CNN, shows smoke rising from the area around the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait earlier today. Meantime, Tehran ramping up its rhetoric and its attacks. The Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister declaring the country, quote, will not negotiate with the United States.
Our policy towards our neighbors is quite clear. We want best of relations with our neighbors. At the same time, before the aggression, we informed our neighbors that if the America or Israel engages in animosity against Iran, definitely we will be in self-defense mode, and we will target the American assets, the American military bases in the region, wherever they are located, because they are legitimate targets in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter. Therefore, whatever we are doing is to act in self-defense against American targets and American assets in the region.
Well, we are across the world on the breaking news developments and what they mean. Paula Hancock is in Dubai. Mary Eisen is a senior fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University in Israel and a retired member of the IDF. She is in Tel Aviv. First, let's get you to CNN's Fred Pleitgen, who is in Berlin. And Fred, I want to hear more from that Pentagon event that we've just been listening to and has just wrapped up. That was Pete Hegseth, of course, with the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Dan Kane. Let's just have a listen to a little more.
This is not a single overnight operation. The military objectives that CENTCOM and the Joint Force have been tasked with will take some time to achieve, and in some cases will be difficult and gritty work. We expect to take additional losses, and as always, we will work to minimize U.S. losses.
What were your key takeouts from that press conference? Of course, this is really the first time we've heard from the Trump administration in a sort of open setting, taking questions since this conflict began.
Yeah, Becky, on the one hand, I think, first of all, the fact that they were talking about this military confrontation going on for an extended period of time, that the United States is willing to stay in this for quite a while. One of the big takeaways that I had was Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, as it's now called, saying that the United States will end this on its own terms, on America first terms, and that it is in it for that. On the other hand, of course, they outlined some of the key ways that this operation got started, the intelligence that started, some of the cyber activities. One of the things was interesting was the one-way drones that the United States had been using, but then also the use of some of America's most powerful assets, like those B-2 bombers that the United States said that they did use to try and take out some of that missile infrastructure from the Iranians, and of course some of it very much deep inside mountainsides and the very mountainous terrain of Iran. Also, one thing that I think shed a lot of light on how this operation started was that I think it was Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, saying that all of this happened because of a one-time event that was led by the Israelis. Of course, we know that these the military operations started with an attack, among others, on the compound of Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. It seemed as though the United States was referring to that and saying that that was an Israeli operation, but using American intelligence. That obviously seems to indicate that indeed possibly United States intelligence assets were following and tracking the movements of Iran's supreme leader. One of the interesting things that we're picking up from Iran today, Becky, was indeed Ali Larijani, whom you quoted before, the head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, who said that the Iranians right now will not negotiate with the United States. He came out later on social media and said that Iran, as he put it, is prepared for a long war, unlike the United States, he says. So it seems as though, as of right now, the Iranians remain in it. The Iranians are going to fire back, and certainly at this point in time, it seems as though diplomacy is very much on the rocks. I was also scanning Iranian social media and some of the official outlets, and there was one Iranian military commander who was quoted saying that the Iranians had fired thousands of missiles already at Israel and of course also other targets in the greater Middle Eastern region, but that these were older missiles and that the Iranians had not yet even tapped their newer arsenal. So clearly some very bullish language there coming out of Tehran this morning, Becky.
Let me just bring in the U.S. National Security Analyst Alex Plitzas, who has just joined us, and it's good to have you. And we're talking about what we took out of the Pentagon press conference that was just heard, Alex. Even as we see new videos of the latest strikes on Tehran, it sounds like this will end no time soon as far as the Pentagon is concerned. What did you make of what you just heard?
I mean, actually, I thought the briefing was fairly appropriate in the sense that it stuck to military objectives for what the U.S. was trying to achieve from the Pentagon. The outcome afterwards, whether it's regime change or how this is eventually settled, so whether that's through a negotiated settlement of some sorts with the remnants of the Iranian government, or whether that's through an actor on the ground, that's largely a political process that the military will set the conditions for if, in fact, that's going to happen. So I think the military picture is probably clear for the next few days or so, and that's if you're moving through fixed infrastructure targets, having moved on from intelligence-driven ones like leaders, some of the ability to retaliate like missiles and drones. And then at some point, the president said in his 8-minute video that he released at the onset of the conflict that the Iranian people should hunker down. It's their once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take over the government, and we'll let you know when it's safe. So seemingly at some point, he'll come back and say, okay, we're done with that part now, come take over. And that's if they don't find somebody to negotiate with in the interim. And then what do you do? Try to provide tactical air support to protesters on the ground without combat controllers or folks there becomes increasingly difficult over time. So it really becomes unclear at that point. So the Pentagon appeared to be sticking to military objectives and what it is that they seek to do and stay out of the fray. And, just speaking of the military footprint, there are no ground forces deployed in the region. So there was, several questions about whether or not the U.S. would deploy them. They're simply not there at the moment. Doesn't mean they can't be mobilized, but it doesn't look like there's any immediate plans to put U.S. boots on the ground.
A perspective from Alex on what we heard from the Pentagon. Let me bring in Miri Eisen at this point. You are very familiar with IDF operations and what the Defence Forces would be trying to achieve here. What do you make of what we just heard from the Pentagon? And does what you heard from the US reflect the same end goal, the same strategy that the Israeli government has? Will they be happy with what they've just heard?
Becky, from Israel, we've been hearing the IDF spokesperson from the beginning. We've also been hearing the Prime Minister time after time and the Minister of Defense, Israel Katz. I just say that because from here, they're stating more clearly. First of all, the IDF put on the table what the targets were, both in the initial attack, killing in that first initial attack over 40 high-ranking IRC, if it's also the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, different ones from the regime, and of course, Khamenei himself. And I heard also now that Khamenei's wife has also died from that attack that Israel did at the beginning. So one is against different symbols of the regime. Hand in hand to be able to do this, and that's always going to be there, you have to have air superiority. So you're constantly going after any kind of air defense that the Iranians could use. The Iranians, of course, claimed the fact that they downed those U.S. planes. That is not true. The Iranian deputy foreign minister that was put in a sink on before says lots of things that I don't believe. They say that they're not willing to negotiate. When Larijani says 6,000 years of history and they have a long time, that I believe. And the Israeli Defense Forces are attacking right now the different types of sites that could help, if possible, the Iranian people if they can do any kind of change of government. They've been attacking the Israeli planes, the Basij, the different police headquarters, police stations, some of the prisons where the people who had been arrested by the regime over the last 2 months have been held. Those are already in the targeting, but it's mainly against missiles, missile launchers, air defense, and against the regime targets.
I want to bring in Paula at this point, who is in Dubai. It's been remarkable living here as we do in the Gulf, in the UAE, to have witnessed Iran as it fires hundreds of missiles at the Gulf region, nearly 700 between the drones and the ballistic missiles that have been fired at the UAE alone in the past more than 48 hours. And countries around this region of the Gulf are absolutely outraged, describing these strikes as completely disproportionate to the US attacks on Iran. After all, Iran had threatened to hit US bases should the US get involved. But these strikes, Paula, have been way outside even that remit, as it were. Non-military facilities have been struck all over this region. I want to take a look at the fire that broke out at Ras Tanura in Saudi Arabia today. The Saudis say they intercepted 2 drones. I need to stress that the Deputy Foreign Minister just denied that Iran was responsible for this event. But what are we learning at this point about what's being struck around this region and the response?
So, Becky, you mentioned the oil refinery in Saudi Arabia. That oil refinery produces about 500,000 barrels of oil a day. So that is a key refinery within the whole of Saudi's oil infrastructure. As you say, 2 drones were intercepted on top of that refinery. We have seen the damage that is obviously causing oil prices to rise significantly. Then you also have in Qatar, the LNG distribution is being disrupted as well. Qatar Energy saying that they had in Ras Laffan an Iranian attack on that facility. They've had to shut production down. Qatar accounts for about 20% of the LNG exports around the world. So it's a major producer. So that's having an impact as well. That is just the energy sector there. But when it comes to what else we have seen attacks on shipping. We have seen attacks that have affected hotels here in Dubai. We have been seeing what the Iranians claim is attacks on US military targets, really spreading far beyond that. I mean, here in Dubai, for example, this is, it's an international travel hub. It's an international global commerce hub. It's like a ghost city at this point. Everybody being told to shelter in place, and this is being replicated across the Gulf. These aren't countries that are prepared or anticipating this kind of military attack. The UAE, for example, has seen the vast majority of these drone and missile attacks. The figures we have from the Ministry of Defense, and this is from Sunday, we have been seeing more missiles and drones being intercepted, so we know the number's higher, but 165 ballistic missiles, 2 cruise missiles, 541 drones fired into the UAE alone. More than 90% of those, though, more than 92%, have been intercepted by officials here, by the Ministry of Defense, by the military. We know that they have very strong air defense capabilities, but it is a shock to this region. Leaders are particularly angry that they themselves have found their countries being under attack as well. Given the fact many of these countries said to the US, you cannot use our bases, you cannot use our airspace, we don't believe you should attack Iran. They believe that would have distanced themselves somewhat from what is happening right now, but that is not the way Tehran sees it. We saw a unified statement from the GCC, the Gulf nations, denouncing what Iran is doing. Becky?
Miri, let me bring you back in, Miri Eisen in Tel Aviv. We heard Sunday from the Israeli Prime Minister, and I just want our viewers to have a listen to this.
We are in a campaign in which we are bringing the full force of the IDF as never before to ensure our existence and our future. But we are also bringing into this campaign the assistance of the United States, my friend, US President Donald Trump, and the US military. And this combination of forces enables us to do what I have long hoped to do for 40 years, to strike the terror regime decisively. That is what I promised, and that is what we will do.
Ali Larijani, Iran's security chief, has echoed or suggested that this isn't an America first policy, that this is an Israel first policy. That is the volley that he has posted today on X. This is the Israeli government's ideal scenario, is what he's saying. Is it?
There is no ideal scenario in war, Becky, and the fact that we're quoting Ali Larijani, not exactly to me the most reliable voice. He's the Islamic regime. You're going to bring him on. I would add in, put a few sinks of Khamenei before we killed him, where he would call us the cancer of the world that needs to be eliminated. He prayed for it and tried for it every day. Israel does not pull the world by the nose, and I'm going to be rude and say that the Islamic regime was also well known for its Shoah, Holocaust denial. They hosted every year a Holocaust denial conference in Tehran. So again, they're saying that Israel is the one that's pulling, to me, is what they want to show right now. The world hates Israel. If Israel is doing it, it must be bad. The United States is the big Satan for Iran. Israel is the little Satan for this Islamic regime. I'm not talking about the Persian people. I'm talking about this Islamic regime. I don't necessarily support my own prime minister every single day, Becky, but when it comes to what's happening right now, this is called preventive. There's no question that the Islamic regime wanted to annihilate us, and that was said in Khamenei's voice all of the time.
What's the objective here, Miri? Before I move on to Alex and talk strategy here, what's the objective here? I mean, regime change to a degree has already happened with these decapitation strikes, and the US has called on the Iranian people to rise up and take over its government. Two questions, I guess. How long does Israel believe it will take for Iranians to rise up and take over their government? And who do they believe that government, or what do they believe that government should look like?
So, Becky, what you're asking me is how we in Israel, all 10 million of us, know the difference of what's going to happen in Iran, 93 million strong. I don't know how the Iranian people will do so, but both you and me saw that over the last few weeks, they came out into the streets, not saying that they're for Israel, not saying that they're for the United States, saying that they were against the regime that what did the regime invest in missiles and proxies and in nuclear capability, not in their own people. What Israel is doing right now in the targeting is perhaps enabling the capability to do regime change. It's to take out those police forces that are against their own people. It's to take out that fist that the Islamic regime has used, holding us all hostage. And that's what I think that we're trying to do right now. I can but hope for them, but I do not think that Israel is the one that brings about the regime change.
Okay, Alex, very briefly, I want to talk to you about the friendly fire incident that we've seen in Kuwait today. Can you put that loss in context? Just how unusual is it to see 3 planes go down like that?
Well, I think they were in close concentration because of where they were flying. It is definitely unusual. Those, roll-off costs for each one of those aircraft are about $100 million US, so that's about a $300 million loss. Never mind the 6 lives, which were thankfully not lost, as the pilots and weapons officers were able to safely eject. So, very unusual incident.
Really. Thank you. Alex, Miri, thank you for being with us. Thanks to Paula and to Fred, my colleagues as well. All right, coming up, how the war is reigniting the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah and what each side is saying could happen next. That is coming up.
Here's a breakdown of what you can find out front. The real question comes down to, where is the supreme leader? Where are we when it comes to inflation? Direct, in-depth, and raw. Do you think that Pam Bondi is hiding something?
Hell yeah, I think she's hiding something.
Getting ahead of the biggest stories and giving you context you won't find anywhere else. We are in an unprecedented moment. Do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism.
Aaron Burnett out front. Weekdays on CNN.
On Laura Coates Live, we cover it all, from legal battles.
At least one juror has now been excused.
Political showdowns.
How much you think that weighs on the president?
And the conversations in between.
Wayne from Washington. Wayne, what's your question? Will you take this all the way to the Supreme Court?
I'm not refuting a syllable of what you said.
What do you say to people who are looking to find their voice?
All the news, all on Laura Coates Live, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
Whoever controls Snake Island controls the Black Sea.
This whole island is littered with landmines.
A year ago when we were here in Pyongyang, you couldn't turn a corner without seeing anti-American propaganda. Now you're seeing much more of this. This is about building a socialist economy.
Do you worry that this could be the place where there could be the beginning of a bigger conflict between Taiwan and mainland China?
Do you have faith that the United States would defend Taiwan?
I do have faith.
Is there justice for Muslims like you in India today?
No. Our only crime is that we are Muslims.
We are underneath a giant tent with thousands of people outside Delhi.
I've never been anywhere like this before. An Israeli father of 4 who left home and drove directly into danger.
Israel is threatening to ramp up its attacks on Lebanon as the war spreads across the region. The Israeli military launched a wave of strikes on Beirut in southern Lebanon today after Hezbollah fired a number of projectiles and drones towards northern Israel. Hezbollah called it revenge for the killing of Iran's supreme leader. Israel says the attack didn't do any damage. The Israeli strikes, though, have killed at least 31 people, according to the Lebanese Ministry of Public Health. Right, I want to bring in Firas Maqsad. He's the managing director for the Middle East and North Africa at Eurasia Group. It's remarkable. You and I last spoke on Friday. We were talking about the potential for an attack. You and I discussed the potential for an Israeli involvement in an attack, if not Israel striking first. Here we are, nearly 72 hours on from the beginning of this operation. The Israeli military now says all options are on the table in regard potential ground operations in Lebanon. What do you make of what we are seeing there?
What a historic 3 days it's been since we last spoke, Becky. First, I would need to highlight that this is certainly a sign of desperation, not on behalf of Hezbollah alone, but on the behalf of the Iranian government. To throw Hezbollah into the mix here, the Iranians understand very well how weak Hezbollah is. It's been much weakened since the last round of fighting between the group and Israel. Across the board in Lebanon, it is deeply unpopular for Lebanon to join this war. It's not only sort of in the traditional opposition to Hezbollah, but even within Hezbollah's own support base, nobody wants this. The reason for this is because Iran doesn't have much left to throw at Israel. They have only a limited number of longer-range ballistic missiles, and the Israelis certainly also need to consider how many interceptors they have left. And in many ways, Israel and Iran are engaged in a war of attrition. So Iran deciding to throw Hezbollah here in the mix is a desperate attempt to open a second front, to further distract Israel. And I think a reflection of the fact that Iran really needs Hezbollah at this point, despite it knowing that Hezbollah is in a pretty bad shape militarily and also in terms of the support base it has in Lebanon.
We have learned today that the Lebanese government has announced that it has banned Hezbollah's military and security activities as illegal. It's calling on the Iran-backed group to surrender its weapons. How big a deal is that announcement, and what do you think of the timing?
Historic. Hezbollah has enjoyed a freedom of operation in Lebanon pretty much since its inception in the early 80s. And no Lebanese government has been able to take the group head on. Activities illegal. So this is very important. It must be underscored. But obviously where the rubber meets the road is the ability to implement. And here I think everybody's going to be looking at the Lebanese armed forces, the LAF, which are much more aware and attuned of, they're concerned about force cohesion. A significant number of their troops come from the same support base that Hezbollah taps into. I think what's going to be crucial in terms of the ability to implement anything like this, to try and actively restrict Hezbollah's military activities, is going to be the political cover that the Lebanese army is provided from within Hezbollah's Shia community. And here the House Speaker, Nabih Berri, who is the alternate sort of political force within the Shia community, he has a very important role to play in terms of providing the Lebanese army, the Lebanese state, that legitimacy, that cover for it to be able to implement this historic decision.
I want to take a look at the wider context here and what we've seen since these initial strikes on Iran is a response across the region where I am of the Gulf. The Gulf countries who had, were well aware that there was a threat on US bases hosted around this region, had said from the outset that they wouldn't get involved, they wouldn't bases to be used. As described here and around this region, disproportionate response from Iran on military and non-military assets, firing hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones, nearly 700 in total at the UAE alone, has been quite remarkable to witness. I want you to hear from the Qatari spokesman, who I spoke to a little earlier. Stand by.
Have always championed peace in the region. We've always championed peaceful means in solving conflict in the region, especially with Iran, where we have in the past mediated between Iran and Western countries and the US a number of times. We were heavily supporting the Omani-led negotiations that were taking place until this escalation. But an attack like this cannot go unanswered and cannot be left without retaliation. Last time we were attacked by Iran in the course of these escalations, we decided to opt for peace because there was a chance for peace at the time, but this cannot happen every time.
And all countries in this region have said they reserve the right to respond. They are sticking within the contours of international law, seeking a UN Security Council sort of, meeting, looking at the Article 51 language, which talks about self-defense, looking to work as a group. A GCC sort of meeting has been held. A statement has been announced. But how would you describe the mood across the Gulf right now, with sources that you are speaking to? And very specifically and importantly, what do you expect these countries to do next?
Becky, the GCC is in a very difficult place, to put it mildly. And I worry that they're going to continue to be in a difficult place for some days and weeks ahead. In fact, I worry that the center of gravity of this conflict is going to be shifting from Israel, precisely because of what I was talking about, that war of attrition, in terms of Iran's limited longer range missiles that are able to successfully get at Israel on one hand, and then Israel's ability to block in terms of interceptors on the other. What the Iranians have a lot more of are the short-range ballistic missiles that are capable of reaching the Gulf, and thousands of drones, suicide drones, which they are able to manufacture. So as the Iranians run out of the longer-range stuff, increasingly the center of gravity of this conflict is going to be shifting to the GCC and oil infrastructure. And I think that's why we're seeing that the USS Ford, that naval carrier group that was initially parked in the Eastern Mediterranean off the coast of Israel, right now is about halfway through to the Gulf, to Gulf waters, because that's where the center of gravity is going to go. Now, Gulf officials that I speak to, obviously a deep sense of frustration given the role that they played in encouraging diplomacy with Iran rather than conflict, only to now find themselves being in the bullseye. American security officials I speak to believe that there is little in terms of offensive capabilities that the Gulf can bring to bear against Iran right now. Probably the best decision and what we might anticipate moving forward is that some of these restrictions that the GCC had in place, commitments to Iran that their bases, their airspace will not be used by the US or Israel to attack it. I think some of these restrictions now are going to be lifted, and we're going to see, as the theater of war shifts, the US much more focused on defending the GCC.
I hear from a number of key stakeholders around this region, the strikes from Iran on this region have been completely disproportionate. Outside of just these sort of US military assets, I mean, we're talking about the economy in under fire effectively here in the UAE and oil facilities and the rest around the region. All right, look, it's always good to have you, Firas. I've said it before and I'll say it again, your analysis and insight so important to us at what is such a critical time. It is Monday, March the 2nd, just after 6:30 here in the evening. Thank you for us. And it's just after 9:30 on the first day of trading since this conflict began. In New York, we have got the Dow Jones Industrial Average a couple of minutes into the trading day, down about 1%. I mean, that's not as bad as it might have done given the futures markets earlier on. So all three of these markets, in fact, now I can see the Nasdaq and the S&P also down by a similar amount. Oil prices have surged. Keep an eye on these US assets and markets around the world. You're watching Connect the World. There's a lot more news ahead. Stay with us.
Mama, my smallie. Gen Z mama we carry better swag. You dey wine. It be like say plenty credit don't overload for that your size. Credit now water. You say no now. Glow Talk Master. My little lioness. When they retire senior lions. I dey make one better dress where you go wear for these holidays. When I land them, I go finish you with plenty kisses.
Who you dey kiss they finish on my credit, eh?
Who be this? Mr. Man.
Mama.
Why they disturb us now?
You almost give me heart attack, oh.
Feel like say you never hear about Glow Talk Master. We get free data, let's video call her. Hi,
girl. Free on Glow Talk Master. Talk for 6 minutes and get 6 minutes free. Plus 15 megabytes of data free. Simply dial *606#. 2,000 naira for new customers. 1,000 naira for voice. 1,000 naira for data. Glow.
Did the re-election of Donald Trump play any role in your decision to resign? Why do you need to study it? It sounds like you have the facts on your fingertips.
Great question.
You continue to fight for your name to be cleared. Why? Do you have any concerns it's about Elon Musk.
There really is much more that unites us as Americans than that which divides us.
A moment with huge consequences for the nation and the world.
Watch The Lead, weeknights on CNN.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
I'm Melissa Bell in Paris, and this is CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Well, Saudi Arabia's state oil giant Aramco has temporarily shut its Ras Tanura refinery, which is a major hub for Saudi crude exports. Now, this is a significant story. Officials say the shutdown was a precaution after 2 drones were intercepted and debris sparked a fire. No injuries were reported there. And just a few hours ago, Qatar's state-run energy company, Qatar Energy, says it has stopped its production of liquefied natural gas following an Iranian attack on its facility in Ras Laffan. Attention firmly remains on the Strait of Hormuz, the vital shipping lane that runs through the waters of both Iran and Oman. You see it here. About 1/5 of the world's oil passes through that very narrow strait you can see marked up there. The Strait of Hormuz, obviously critical for global shipping. And it is not just energy infrastructure that is under pressure. AWS, the cloud computing arm of Amazon, says its UAE data center remains disrupted after one was struck by objects that caused sparks and a fire, with connectivity restoration expected to take several hours. Well, look, joining me now is Chief Global Market Strategist, Equity Group, Nuruddin Al-Hamouri. He's here in Abu Dhabi. Also with us, CNN Global Economic Analyst, Rana Furahar. To both of you, thank you. A very, very busy day and a worrying one in this region where we are, Nuruddin. Let's start with what we've just touched on, Saudi and Qatar there. We've also seen a commercial vessel has been struck by 2 projectiles while docked at the port of Bahrain, forcing the crew to evacuate. In Kuwait, a major oil refinery hit by falling shrapnel. It does increasingly seem like Iran is deliberately targeting non-military installations, oil and gas, supply routes in the Gulf. We've seen Iran denying hitting Saudi oil infrastructure. Be that as it may, just how impactful is this for the region and its economy?
I mean, definitely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me again on the show. This is not just a symbolic, or it's just not symbolic. Aramco infrastructure is not just part of the global production. It's the infrastructure of the global spare capacity buffer. They hold, of course, the majority of OPEC and OPEC plus spare capacity. If refining capacity is disrupted, it affects, of course, not just oil. You're talking about product markets, diesel, jet fuel, and others. Even if crude production remains stable, but I think also the market remembers what happened in 2019 in the Begig, when oil spiked nearly 20% on intraday. But at the same time, we know that the Saudi Arabia and the region have enough resources to recover, and this is what happened also in 2019. The issue isn't whether production collapses. The issue here is whether spare capacity credibility gets questioned, and I don't think so. This is going to happen anytime soon.
Ryan, let me bring you in. It isn't clear how long this goes on. How prepared do you understand shipping companies and, for example, insurers are for repeated drone attacks or disruptions like we are seeing in the Gulf at this point?
Yeah, Becky, it's a great question. I think not as prepared as they would like to be. Shipping companies in particular, I think, are vulnerable. I mean, the drone strikes are very interesting because they are yet another reminder, Ukraine being the first time that we saw drone warfare, modern drone warfare, but we're seeing this now with Iran firing these cheap missiles that can take out, a lot of very expensive infrastructure very quickly. Battleships can be taken down now by an $800 drone on a missile. That changes the entire nature of warfare. It also changes the economic calculations. Insurers, I think, are really going to be hunkering down. I mean, they're going to hunker down for a lot of reasons. And, I would just make a point, too, that the AWS impact on data centers, I think, brings up an issue that goes even beyond the oil business and energy and security in the region, which is that the idea that the Gulf was going to be able to successfully move away from fossil fuels and into areas like energy infrastructure, communications, I think that's a big question now. I mean, this is still a very risky area with a lot of challenges, as we're saying.
Well, while we're on that, Nuruddin, let me bring up that very specifically. AWS services in the UAE currently disrupted. Currently, the UAE operates 35 data centers, 18 in Dubai, 18 or 16 in Abu Dhabi, 1 in Fujairah. Other major companies with data centers here include Microsoft, Azure, Oracle, Alibaba. Banking apps have been down. Okay, I'm going to just stop for a moment. I just want to bring up the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is speaking in English. Let me just listen.
They would target Europe. They did. And if this regime, this terrorist regime of the kind we've never seen in the world, if they get nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them, ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, they will threaten all of humanity. So we set out to protect ourselves. But in so doing, we protect many others. And I want to say special thanks to our great friend and a great leader of the world, Donald Trump, for joining us in this crucial effort to save the world. Thank you.
Each day said this war is expanding. How do you see it? Prime Minister, you spoke to the Indian Prime Minister. You spoke to the Indian Prime Minister. Yes. Can you say about...
All right. Well, that was Benjamin Netanyahu speaking a little earlier to us. I can't tell you where, unfortunately, and unless one of my producers can tell me in my ear. But you've just heard from the Prime Minister there, clearly on the conflict as it stands at present. Rana, let me just bring you in. We were talking about oil and gas. We were talking about the impact on Saudi, the impact on Qatar Energy. I just wonder what you think that means for the global energy market, and whether these incidents could actually push companies to diversify away from the Middle East. I mean, what are the operational risks?
Yeah.
What steps do firms take to protect themselves at this point? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a huge impact, Becky, at both the macro and the micro level. Let me just start at the macro level. I wrote a column about a month ago predicting the oil prices were going to go to about 100. I think that's going to turn out to be right. I think they could go higher. I think the markets have been underplaying geopolitical risk and economic choke points like the Straits of Hormuz. We don't even know yet where the situation in the Middle East is going to land. Donald Trump says things will be done in 4 to 5 weeks. I doubt it. There are a lot of countries that are going to be impacted beyond the U.S. and the Middle East. You're going to see big energy importers like India, for example, I think being hit very hard by a rise in energy prices. Europe is also going to take a big hit. Energy was already constrained as Europe tries to diversify away from Russian sources. You're now going to see higher prices there. U.S. supply, the extra U.S. supply that's being pumped by this administration really pushing petro. It has yet to come online. So I think we're looking at higher prices for a much longer period of time. I think companies are going to be really thinking twice. I mean, this is the first big test that we've had about geopolitical security and risk in this region since the Gulf has built all these data centers and really tried to, again, diversify away in these energy intensive sectors that require very minute and precise levels of electricity and energy. And I just think it's a risky business. I think also you're going to see maybe China coming into the mix here. China gets about 20% of its oil from Iran. Big questions about how that country is going to get involved in this region, and it could make the situation much bigger than it is now.
Yeah. Well, we've got the oil prices on the screen as you speak. They are higher by some 7 or 8% today, and it's bringing the stock prices. Actually, I have to say the US markets have been open for about 14 minutes now, and the market's actually not as bad as some had anticipated. They would be off by around about 0.5 to 0.8%. We saw them in the futures markets significantly lower than that actually earlier on. So these markets not doing as badly as some had expected them to be. Good to have you both. Noor-Aldin, apologies for cutting you slightly short as we went to the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, at Beit Shemesh is where he was speaking, my producer told me. So there you go. All right, to both of you, thank you. Well, our Commander-in-Chief is steady at the wheel. That message from America's Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon briefing last hour. But will we hear from the US President himself today on what is this widening conflict with Iran? A live report from the White House is just ahead.
Welcome to this event is for all of us who believe in Africa, who believe that trade with the US is important. It's a good opportunity to get all leaders together, political leaders, investors, businessmen.
This is a real, true partnership.
Angola is ready for investments. This fertilized project is to create opportunity for young people and to support our continent. It was important to show that this project will transform Africa.
This summit has been truly amazing in the opportunity to network.
No person is an island, and no country progresses in isolation. We are all building Africa's future every day.
In a city like Riyadh, which is growing faster than ever, we built Khuzam, our flagship project.
Khuzam is more than 45 million square meters for more than 300,000 residents. We hope the legacy in Khuzam to be the heart of Riyadh, to work and live and invest in the future.
A living example of Saudi Vision 2030 for a livable, sustainable community.
Connections across Africa are reshaping business, creating opportunities like never before. On Connecting Africa, follow the network of deals, smart conversations, and people transforming business to bring the continent together.
This month, Connecting Africa through rail infrastructure.
Trade cannot happen without faster movement of goods and services.
Connecting Africa, only on CNN, in association with Afrexim Bank.
Well, the Trump administration is expected to update key lawmakers today on what is this rapidly unfolding situation in Iran and around this region. Later today, that's according to a source who says the full US House and Senate are set to get a full briefing on Tuesday. Meanwhile, we are waiting to see if President Donald Trump will speak on camera about the war. He returned to the White House on Sunday night from his Mar-a-Lago club. That is where he ordered the strikes, but did not answer a single question from reporters about Iran. Let's get the latest from senior White House reporter Kevin Liptak. President Trump has spoken to a series of reporters off camera and taken to social media with some updates, including a potential timeline on US involvement in this conflict. What's he been saying?
Well, the president seems to suggest that this may go on for 4 to 5 weeks. That seems to be the biggest takeaway of these multiple phone calls that he's taken to lay out some of what his objective is in this conflict. You know, we haven't seen the president, as you mentioned, answered questions in front of cameras, which is quite a rarity for, you know, the most voluble of presidents. He has said virtually nothing to the media, except in those sort of two pre-recorded videos that the White House put out over the weekend. Now, we will see the president in a little bit over an hour. He's doing a Medal of Honor ceremony here at the White House. It seems exceedingly unlikely that he'll use that event to start taking questions. Of course, this briefing that we just got at the Pentagon was really the administration's first opportunity to shed some more light on what exactly it is that the president is trying to accomplish. But even in that briefing, you heard some contradictory viewpoints from what the president himself is saying. When it comes to the timeline, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth really kind of brushing off a question, quite defensive about how long this might last, saying that they will never lay out in front of the press pool how long it may take, even though President Trump himself has laid out a timeline. You also heard Pete Hegseth say that this was not a regime change war, even though the regime seems to have changed. That's also slightly different from what President Trump has been saying, you know, in his initial response to the strikes, saying that the Iranian people should rise up and overthrow their leadership. So I still think, even as the administration on this Monday morning starts to come out and lay out some of what they're trying to accomplish here, a lot of the message remains very muddled. I do think it was notable, and it does speak to the president's political conundrum here. He spent a lot of time trying to insist that this was not going to become the next Iraq, that this was not an endless war, that it was, we set the terms of this war from start to finish. Of course, President Trump had run for president saying that he would not be in the business of starting wars and trying to change regimes. So clearly, I think an indication that political messaging is now coming to the forefront. Becky.
Copy that. Thank you, Kevin. Kevin's at the White House. We will be right back after this.
Because some meetings can't wait. Experience faster than your home Wi-Fi on board with Starlink, free for all passengers on Qatar Airways.
Dear Africa, thank you for your energy, your inspiration, your voice. We've watched in awe with every call made, every story shared, every dream chased. And today, we celebrate 300 million people connected as one Indian nation. The future is alive with endless possibility, and it starts with just one simple word.
Yellow.
April 20th, Global Perspectives in Doha. The CNN event series returns to bring together the global leaders and cultural innovators shaping the future. Find out more about the event and register now. In every corner of Africa are breathtaking landscapes, inspiring breakthroughs,
All right, let's go!
and the people that enrich communities. Delve deep into every facet of this great continent. Inside art and culture, sports, inside business, tech, and so much more. Inside Africa on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
I'm Pau Mosquera in Madrid, Spain, and this is CNN.
I'm Becky Anderson from our Middle East programming headquarters here in Abu Dhabi, covering the very latest on what is day 3 of this escalating conflict after the strike Saturday by the US and Israel on Iran. Earlier today, I spoke with Majid Al-Ansari. He is the spokesperson for Qatar's foreign ministry and advisor to the Prime Minister. This is a country that has repelled attacks from more than 100 Iranian missiles and scores of drones in the last few days. I asked Al-Ansari about how Qatar is defending itself and whether the government there is in contact with officials in Tehran. Have a listen.
When it comes to our economic facilities, the offshore facilities that we have and the onshore facilities, I can assure you that military has taken all possible precautions in making sure that all these places are defended and that the people working over there are safe. We've mandated a work from home for everybody working in Qatar at the moment, and we're asking everybody to shelter in place for the time being, and we've down our airspace in anticipation of any such attacks. But we are confident in our abilities. You know, with Iran, we've been working with them very closely on a lot of things, but we also had our disputes with them. You know, for 14 years we were at odds when it comes to the support of Bashar's regime in Syria. We know the threat that constituted to the region, and therefore right now we are defending our country against these attacks, but we will always opt for peace when there is a chance to have it.
So the advisor to the president here, Anwar Gargash, has called on Iran to come to its senses. I mean, is Qatar's leadership in touch with Tehran? And if so, who do you have open lines with? I mean, it's not clear who is leading the country at present. Iran's top security chief, Ali Larijani, has just said he will not negotiate with the United States. He said Trump's wishful thinking has dragged the whole nation into an unnecessary war with, quote, false hopes and misleading negotiations. I mean, where does that leave Qatar and the region? And again, I put it to you, are you speaking to Tehran, and if so, to whom at this point?
As of this moment, we are not engaging with government. We are busy, as you might imagine, defending our country and making sure that the people in Qatar are safe. And we will always have channels of communication open, but at this moment we are not contacting the Iranians. What we believe in right now is that however this drags on, at the end, solution will be made at the dialogue table. Solution will be made through negotiations, and that has to be done at one time or another when this escalation is over. But right now, our focus is on keeping our people safe, keeping our region safe, coordinating with our partners in the region and beyond to make sure that all of these attacks do minimal damage to our people, to our economy, and that we are able to withstand these attacks. And to this point, I think the military has shown that we are more than capable in defending ourselves.
Position of Qatar a little earlier on today. Connect the World continues with me, Becky Anderson, from our Middle East programming headquarters after this short break. Stay with us.
I want to make an impact in our society. The walls and the borders in Africa must come down and create opportunity.
And then this continent can finally take off.
Weekdays on CNN.
Tonight on 360.
The stories that matter.
This whole area is just engulfed in flames.
From a trusted voice.
We witnessed something nobody alive has ever seen before. You said that AI could wipe out half of all entry-level jobs. How soon might that happen?
A fearless eyewitness.
We just got a red alert to go down to a bomb shelter.
Every night makes sense of the world.
How do you make the case that USAID's previous mission was in the United States' national interest?
Anderson Cooper 360. Weekdays on CNN.
I'm Jake Tapper, and this is CNN.
On Laura Coates Live, we cover it all.
Will you take this all the way to the Supreme Court?
I'm not refuting a syllable of what you said.
What do you say to people who are looking to find their voice?
All the news, all on Laura Coates Live, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
Every day we take a step back to look at the big picture. From decisions made in Washington to the ripple effects across Asia, Europe, and beyond. We follow the story as it unfolds and hear every voice to make sure the information is clear, fair, and relevant to you. In a world packed with noise, facts matter. That's what we do here. This is The Brief.
Centuries to come, this date will be remembered as a landmark event because it is opening a completely new era in biomedical research.
Russian lines are just 1 kilometer from here.
This is just one of the latest buildings struck by Israel here in the southern suburbs of Beirut.
This is our town, insists Galina. We're staying here. We know our soldiers are protecting us. In the end, a child is a child, says Nadra. The mother of a child is a mother, whether she's Israeli or Palestinian.
In the hub, where East meets West, CNN Arabic is perfectly placed to find the facts. This is where stories happen.
It's a concern to a lot of us in the region.
Politics, business, culture, real life. As the pace of change moves faster, we ask the important question. What is the truth? This is CNNArabic.com.
On March 11, CNN reflects on stories from the past 10 years that shed light on the action and activism dedicated to ending modern-day slavery.
Modern slavery is a stigma on humanity.
This powerful day of coverage will reveal the global nature of the crisis and the growing movement to end it.
When you bring people together, it gives all of us strength.
Hashtag MyFreedomDay, March 11 on CNN.
I'm Rafael Romo in Atlanta. This is CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And welcome to the second hour of the show from our Middle East programming headquarters. I'm Becky Anderson in Abu Dhabi, where the time is just after 7 in the evening. And next hour, US President Donald Trump will address the war in Iran, with this region where I am in the grips of an all-out conflict. And it is a conflict that feels like it is expanding by the hour. The US-Israeli war against Iran setting off wave after wave of fiery attacks as Tehran retaliated, striking countries that host American bases. Saudi Arabia's largest oil refinery set ablaze by falling debris from Iranian drones, which were intercepted in the air. Qatar also coming under fire by Iranian drones in an attack on its energy facilities. This as new footage of huge explosions emerge from Tehran. The US Joint Chiefs chairman saying American planes are, quote, crushing Iranian targets from the air. The fog of war, though, evident in Kuwait, where 3 US fighter jets were accidentally shot down in an apparent friendly fire incident. All 6 of the crew members ejected safely. Overall, 4 American service members have now died. We heard from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth earlier. He says the US had no choice but to go to war. Have a listen.
The former regime had every chance to make a peaceful and sensible deal. But Tehran was not negotiating. They were stalling, buying time to reload their missile stockpiles and restart their nuclear ambitions. Their goal, hold us hostage, threatening to strike our forces. Well, President Trump doesn't play those games.
Well, both the US and Iran indicating that this conflict may be going on or ongoing for some time. The impact being felt worldwide. CNN covering this from points across the globe. We've got reporters in Saudi Arabia, in Iraq, Israel, and here in the UAE, in Washington and in London. Nick Robertson is in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia this hour. Clarissa Ward is on the Iran-Iraq border. Kylie Atwood is in Washington. Let's start with you, Nick. In Riyadh, the strikes across this region have gone way beyond what was threatened. The threats were on military installations, US bases hosted around this region, but the hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones have hit non-military installations, energy, oil, the economy, hotels, and it goes on. What are Saudi officials there telling you?
Iran is intentionally and in a calculated way ignoring the warnings from the GCC countries that Iran should desist from these sorts of attacks, ignoring statements that include that these countries have an option to respond to aggression. Take the attack on the Saudi oil facility today, seen as a significant escalation. 2 drones fired at this massive oil facility. And to give it context, normally you have many, perhaps at times dozens of tankers lining up at sea, waiting to get onto the multiple oil sort of feeding pipelines to fill up the tankers. You have a massive facility built around there. It's a huge area capable of processing up to about 500,000 barrels of oil a day. 2 drones fired at that, intercepted. Shrapnel fell, no casualties, but some equipment on the ground set on fire. The Energy Ministry here saying it's a protective measure. Some of the equipment was shut down. Important, I think, when you look at what the Information Ministry here has told Saudis today, that is, life carries on as normal. So it's a clear message to Saudis that despite what Iran is doing, life is okay, life is moving on. But I think the behind-the-scenes picture is very, very clear. Iran is intentionally ignoring the warnings and intentionally raising the tensions because the calculation is that they want to drive up the price of oil, drive up the overall cost of the war, and therefore, over a period of time, force concessions, or at least force an end from the other partners in this, the United States, Israel, of course.
Clarissa, let me bring you in. You are near the Iran-Iraq border. What are you learning there, and what's the perspective in that part of the world where you are at this point?
So earlier today, Becky, that border reopened for the first time since the U.S. and Israel began their bombing campaign. It was only to allow Iranian drivers with Iranian trucks to get back into Iran and Iraqis who were trapped in Iran to get out back home to Iraq. But while we were there, we actually saw a Shahid drone fly directly over us from Iran into Iraq. Check out that moment, please. Are you nervous about going back into Iran now? See that now. An Iranian drone literally just flew directly over our heads from Iran into Iraq. So, Becky, after that drone flew overhead, they did close the border again for a period of time before reopening it. We then heard another drone going over. We don't know exactly where those drones landed, but it speaks to the challenges that people here living in Kurdistan, Iraqi Kurdistan, are facing. Last night, we heard multiple drones. There have been missiles. There have been rockets. And the people who live here are getting it from both sides, really, because they are being attacked from Iran, but they are also being attacked by Iran-backed militias inside Iraq. So a very complex picture. We did speak to one of those truck drivers who were waiting in line to return to Iran. This man told us that he was very worried and scared about what was happening in his country, but that he needed to get back home to his family, Becky.
Clarissa, it's good to have you here. Thank you. I want to get to Kylie, who's in Washington. Gulf countries, Kylie, have been long-time allies to the United States. They're calling these Iranian attacks, the hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones that have been thrown at these countries, including this one here, the UAE. They're calling this a massive miscalculation on the part of Iran. They reserve the right to respond. Significantly, Kylie, these Gulf countries are describing the attacks as illegal and disproportionate, and they're using the parameters of international law to sort of build the narrative for a response. What is that response likely to look like at this point?
Well, what's critical is that these countries have so swiftly come together with the United States and stood against Iran in the face of Iran's response to the U.S. and Israeli strikes that occurred over the weekend. As you have noted, those strikes by the Iranians have been vast in nature. They have not only gone after U.S. military targets in the region, but they have, in the words of these Gulf countries who are allies with the United States, putting out a statement with the U.S., the Saudis, the Qataris, the Bahrainis, the Jordanians, Kuwaitis, and the Emiratis, calling these strikes indiscriminate, reckless, and unjustified, and saying that they deserve their right to respond, but also to protect themselves against these incoming threats. What's important here, Becky, is that there had been quite a bit of reporting leading up to these U.S. and Israeli strikes about the region privately communicating to the Trump administration that they did not want a major military operation to be carried out against Iran. There were some countries who were more privately in favor of these strikes, but on the whole, the majority of the countries did not want to see this turn into a regional escalation. But at this moment, because of the Iranian response, they are standing by the United States and saying that the Islamic Republic's actions represent a dangerous escalation that violates the sovereignty of multiple states and threatens regional stability. So the United States is standing in a pretty firm position alongside its allies in the region right now. It's important to note that in the next hour here, we're expecting to hear from President Trump. This will be the first time that he is speaking to the American public, to reporters, in a live situation following these U.S. military strikes. We heard earlier from the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff laying out the military objectives for this campaign against Iran, to take out Iran's missile program, to take out Iran's Navy, and to make sure that they don't have a nuclear program. But what we're going to hear from President Trump will be interesting, because he, in the early hours of this conflict, argued that the Iranian people should rise up, that they should be able to, take over control of their country right now. But what we heard from the Pentagon earlier today was that this is not a regime change operation that the United States is engaged in. So we'll watch and see what the president says about that.
To both of you, thank you very much indeed. And just underscoring what she's just said, we are expecting to hear from the US President at 11 a.m. Eastern, which is about 50 minutes from now. To both of you, thank you very much indeed. Well, one senior Gulf source describing to me as Iran having lost all goodwill from Islamic and Arab countries, in what this source described to me as a massive miscalculation. That's the response on these GCC countries. I want to bring in Mohammed Ali Shabani. He's editor of Amwaj Media and a Middle East scholar, joining us from London. You and I regularly talk. I have to say, frankly, I didn't ever expect to be talking to you about attacks from Iran on the region where I am in such scope and scale, but we are. I want first, though, to play a sound of Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister talking about these attacks in the Gulf. Have a listen.
Before the aggression, we informed our neighbors that if the America or Israel engages in animosity against Iran, definitely we will be in self-defense mode, and we will target the American assets, the American military bases in the region, wherever they are located, because they are legitimate targets in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter. Therefore, whatever we are doing is to act in self-defense against American targets and American assets in the region.
Why is a hotel in Dubai a legitimate target?
Our policy remains the same. As I said, we attack military bases and military assets. if they remove from one base to another, that is not our problem.
How about the Saudi oil fields just across the Gulf? Why is that a target?
No, we are not responsible for that. We have already been in touch with our Saudi brothers, and we have talked about this issue. Iran is not responsible for the attack against the oil installations in Saudi Arabia. We have made it clear. We have officially announced today that was not one of the targets of the Iranian armed forces.
Well, Iran using the argument of self-defense in what had been this massive response on the Gulf. In turn, it has to be said, I mean, the Gulf nations absolutely sticking squarely to the sort of framework of international law, calling these attacks massively out of proportion, really disproportionate. And you heard Kylie Atwood there, listing the terms of international law that the GCC are using at this point as they build their case on a response. Of course, they reserve the right to respond to Iran. What do you make of Iran bringing in these Gulf nations into this?
Well, Becky, I think right now Iran is in survival mode. It sees this conflict as existential. And I think the purpose of regionalizing this conflict is to kind of spread the risk, to make sure that the cost of this conflict is not contained to Iran. And the logic, I think, is quite clear. It's try to put pressure on Arab allies of the United States to press Trump to halt this war. We've seen reports in recent days about various countries in the region having privately, supposedly encouraged President Trump to get involved militarily against Iran. We know that U.S. military assets have been amassed in these countries, although they say that those assets are not being used to directly attack Iran. But the reality of the situation is that Iran, at this point in time, when it's being bombarded throughout by both Israel and the United States, it will attack any U.S. target it can reach. And it just so happens that the Gulf states, I think, are the most easy to reach for Iran, apart from Iraq, obviously.
The spokesperson for the Qatari Ministry of Foreign Affairs and advisor to the Prime Minister told me this a couple of hours ago. Have a listen.
We reserve the right to retaliate, and it is with our leadership right now. But obviously, this cannot go unanswered. A price has to be paid for this blatant attack on our people, on the safety of the people and residents from 140 different nationalities living here in Qatar. We have always championed peace in the region. We've always championed peaceful means in solving conflict in the region, especially with Iran, where we have in the past mediated between Iran and Western countries and the US a number of times. We were heavily supporting the Omani-led negotiations that were taking place until this escalation. But an attack like this cannot go unanswered and cannot be left without retaliation.
Speaking to both a Minister of State here in the UAE yesterday and the senior advisor to the President of the UAE, both in the past 48 hours, neither of those UAE spokespeople were closing the door on a diplomatic route. But clearly they see this Iranian retaliation as a massive miscalculation. As I said just before we came to you, one senior Gulf official suggesting that Iran has lost the goodwill of Islamic and Arab nations. And if Gulf nations who had been pushing the US to pursue diplomacy on this are not willing to sort of continue that or press too much harder as they consider the response, the physical response at this point to these attacks, is there any chance of a diplomatic off-ramp at this point, do you think?
Well, Becky, according to the Iranian sources I've spoken to, as in previous U.S. attacks on Iran over the past year, the Trump administration has sent messages warning Iran not to expand the conflict and also encourage Iran to return to the negotiating table. Iran's response has been that twice now over the past year, Iran has been engaged in negotiations with the United States, with the Trump administration, and it's been bombed in the middle of those negotiations. So they're questioning what is there really to talk about. And even if we speak, clearly it's been twice in a row now, within a span of a year, in which the United States is attacked in the middle of a negotiation. So these Arab states who are now caught in the middle, countries like Qatar, countries like Oman, they have facilitated dialogue. And even though they are under attack right now, I think they have a great interest in de-escalation. And they understand that this conflict is a lose-lose for them and also for Iran and the United States. And I think they're very much, anxious to see some kind of diplomacy. The question, I think, is, if you look at this conflict fundamentally, it is most likely an extension of a negotiation, of a political approach. The emphasis is on getting concessions that the United States did not manage to get from Iran at the negotiating table. Hence, war was waged. Now, the two sides, the next step will be about trying to get leverage for what will be the end game. This war will have to end at some point. And I think what we're seeing now is each side trying to position themselves in a way so that they can get more concessions from each other when the time comes to speak. We don't know whether the time comes to speak will be this week or the next week, whether the end of this fasting month of Ramadan, but it will come at some point.
Mohammed, always good to have you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's 7:20 in the UAE. Still ahead, a new front in the war as Israel responds to Hezbollah in Lebanon and launches a wave of strikes. Could a ground invasion follow? That is just ahead. We'll get you live to Tel Aviv.
Explore Africa with CNN, where 54 nations create the fabric of this rich continent. This is really complex. Discover business.
The biggest economic trends impacting the continent.
Nobody has ever done this in Africa.
Clearly, you're seeing something here.
Nature and culture.
I love music. My music, this is everything.
And the stories shaping Africa today.
Exported to markets around the world. The next 5 years, what excites you the most?
I think the digital economy is very, very exciting.
I had this compelling need to do something for my people, for my continent.
It's very, very important for us to tell our own story. The energy is amazing. Feels so good to be here.
Today, we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
It's a noble profession.
Why do you keep us out?
We want to keep you safe.
We're war correspondents. My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
Can you tell me exactly about what's happening right now?
If we don't learn from some of the things in our past, then we're due to repeat them.
We also dive below the headlines.
If we are not blinded by hate, we can teach others humanity.
What does it feel like to be slapped with a 50% tariff? That's not a negotiation, Ambassador.
Any questions?
CNN, what were you thinking when I was trying to get the truth out of you and you were obfuscating?
Well, I thought that actually you saw the contradiction.
It's crucial we make sense of what's happening.
Why do you want your country's future to be decided by US military intervention?
And fully understand what's at stake.
If you can double down on that, amen.
Amanpour, weekdays on CNN.
Right, 7:20 in the UAE. Israel says all options are on the table as it ramps up attacks in Lebanon, including a potential ground operation. Now, this new front opened up after Hezbollah launched missiles and drones towards northern Israel today to avenge the killing of the Iranian supreme leader. Israel says the attacks didn't do any damage, but has responded with a wave of airstrikes as far north as Beirut. Dozens have been killed, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. Well, CNN Chief International Security Correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh is live in Tel Aviv. What more are we learning about Israel's threats to the Lebanese government at this point?
Yeah, I mean, senior Israeli military officials saying ultimately that they will continue this campaign against Hezbollah in Lebanon until the threat from them is gone. Now, that's an inordinate task, but one potentially that's more achievable than in late 2024 when we saw Israel dismantle so much of Hezbollah, leaving that Iranian-backed proxy militia essentially in a very precarious position. And that has been their condition for nearly a year now, leaving many surprised that at noon yesterday they released a statement saying they would be avenging the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and then subsequently the firing of those projectiles, opening them up to an Israeli onslaught that really the Israeli military had been quite clear it was keen to implement, looking for an opportunity, frankly, and that is what they have indeed seized. Now, the Dhahi, a suburb of Beirut, have a Hezbollah stronghold, the recipient of multiple airstrikes in the early hours of today. That seems, according to Lebanese state media, to have continued today as well. The Lebanese government, and this is a stark change potentially from the past, showing how weakened Hezbollah is. They have instructed the army and security forces to try essentially to disarm and prevent Hezbollah having further actions down the line. So if indeed they're able to implement that, and Hezbollah are in a significantly weakened position now, that could mark a turning point potentially inside of Lebanon. But at this particular point, we are seeing indications at this point that Israel is not preparing a major ground offensive. That may change at some point down the line, and are continuing instead to hit southern Lebanon with airstrikes and issue evacuation orders for that part of the country as well, again causing so many residents, some of whom have only just returned back to their damaged homes in recent months, to flee yet again. So Lebanon at a moment again of enormous peril, Israel seizing this particular opportunity to vanquish a long-standing foe to the north that it's already inordinately weakened, and I think many wondering why a deeply weakened Hezbollah like this would step into this conflict in frankly a foolhardy way, where it seems thus far to have lacked the resources to strike back much so far against Israel, yet be facing a foe that is deeply prepared, openly today saying how they have prepared targets here, we're ready for this particular operation, and now appear to be getting that underway. Becky.
Nick Pate-Walsh is there in Tel Aviv in Israel. Good to have you there, Nick. Thank you. The United States' top general has paid tribute to 4 US troops who died on Sunday in Kuwait. Multiple sources told CNN these soldiers were killed in a suspected Iranian drone strike. Well, Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane honoured the 4 soldiers earlier today at a news conference with US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth. Kane vowed the fallen troops would not be forgotten. Hegseth had this to say.